The value of whatever it is we're doing is based on the value of the person paying for that. And if somebody else sees more value, they're going to drive up the market for vehicles, for houses, for land, for equipment, for seed, for chemical, for fertilizer. It doesn't matter. It's so hard to live and everything is so expensive. And yes, because we as humans are the problem. We're paying for stuff and we're overpaying for stuff because we don't put a limit on the value of what that is. Hello, and welcome back to the podcast. Thank you very much for being here. Very, very quickly, we have a Christmas special on books. So if you are looking for stocking stuffers or something to buy your family as a gift, go to farmingwithoutthebank.com, grab the special. Okay, let's get into it. We are going to talk today about the value of something is whatever it is people want to pay. So let's just start with vehicles. It's a good example. Tractors, whatever. The companies mark them up in price, and then somebody goes in and buys that thing. I heard somebody say just recently, I am never paying $100,000 for a vehicle. Okay, then don't. Nobody says that you have to, but there are people out there that are paying $100,000 for a vehicle. And those people are setting the precedence that, hey, I can get $100,000 for a vehicle. The other people are saying, no, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to buy a used vehicle so I don't have to pay the $100,000. Again, fantastic, because then it creates a used market. If I go to stay in a hotel and I say I'm not paying $400 a night for a room, and Joe Schmo comes along and says, well, I'm paying $400 a night for a room, then that place can serve those people that are going to pay $400 a night for a room. What is the value we're placing on it? And so a lot of times we get really mad, especially in the land and the housing market. So here's another example. In the housing market, we're like, why are houses so expensive? Why are you overpaying for houses? If we want something bad enough, we will overpay from the asking price. And we will say, yep, I am willing to pay that because I see the value of that, or I can afford to pay that, but that is the absolute house of my dreams. And so that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to buy that home. That then drives up the market. A lot of it is just driven by emotion. So if we can keep our emotions in check, then we keep the value of stuff in check according to whoever is trying to buy. Right now, we have a lot of millennials and Gen Z trying to buy homes. Okay, so they think it's the last house that's ever going to be built. And so this is the house we want. We're going to pay for over asking. Okay, but then you just drove up every other house in that neighborhood. You drove up the market. So if you don't get that house, now another house is going to go for the same amount. Do we get that? Like, I think that we're forgetting that. And so we recently bought some land. I paid less in Western North Dakota than I would have if I bought it near me. So to me, it was a smoking deal, right? To those people in Western North Dakota, that was not the case. I paid more for that land than anybody has paid in that area. But what I did is I just drove up the price of everybody else's land in that area. And so I said, you're welcome, because I just did that. Now all of you people around this area are worth more. Where I live, there was land that sold close to us. And I am just blown away at what people are paying per acre. But I pay very close attention to it. And so I was like, wow, good for that neighbor person, because that neighbor got $20,000 or $30,000 over asking for their 40 acres. Oh, fantastic. That just drove up the price of my place, right? Because if somebody's willing to pay that as the neighbor, I'm thinking that's absolutely fantastic. I now have more equity in my place just because they bought a place. Like, that happened on closing day, right? I didn't have to wait 5 or 10 years for that. That happened on closing day. Bring it on. There's two ways to look at it. We can look at it like, poor pity me. No, land is so expensive, I can't pay for it. Or, man, now I have more equity in my ground because it raised the value. So can I use the equity from my ground to go buy more ground? Possibly. We got to be smart about it, right? Now, they just raised the price of all the equity in the ground that I have in that area. And so we have to think about it. We are the ones driving the price up. If we are the cheapskate and we say, nope, that land is not worth that because we can't farm it and make money off of it. Okay, those days are long gone. To be able to farm land and make the payment from the land does not exist. Like, people are still mad about that. Move on, my friends. Move on. Those days are not here. If you want land, then we need to stop being concerned about what we want and how, well, we can't pay for it by farming. Yes, go get an off the farm job. I'm going to tell you that the majority of my clients have an off the farm job so they can expand their operations, so they can get started. If you want to live like 1980s and 1970s and the 50s and the 60s, and you want the farm to pay for itself, okay, then we're going to have to figure out how to farm profitable, but then we are going to have to, and I've said this before, so I'm not going to get on this big, huge rant about it, but we are then going to have to start making our own clothes, cutting our own hair, not going out to eat. We don't get to have 2 vehicles or 3 vehicles or 4 vehicles, okay? We are going to go to town once a week. You maybe get to eat out once a month. This was the 90s, you guys. I graduated in 92 from high school. That is when I got a car for graduation. I did not get to drive to school until the last day of school. That was an extremely special occasion that you got picked up from school and you did not have to ride the bus. These kids today, nobody's riding the bus after they get their driver's license. Not around here. You're driving to school. You get a car the second that you get your driver's license because now you're on your own. You're driving to your own stuff, right? We used the family vehicle. We had 2 vehicles. We had a pickup and a car. We didn't get all this stuff that people are getting today. These are luxuries. Remember, Parkinson's law of luxury becomes a necessity, right? Eating out is a luxury. Pop. Let's just talk about pop, soda, whatever you guys call it, wherever you're listening. We picked rocks all day. All day we picked rocks. And then our reward was getting a can of pop. Oh my God, if we were super lucky, we got a root beer float. It was like the best day in the world. Not a root beer float from A&W, a root beer float with Schwann's ice cream and a can of root beer at home. It was a treat to have a frozen pizza. So if you want the farm to pay for all those things and you want to stay home, make your own bread. You're going to live like you were living in the 80s. Get rid of all the vehicles. Go to town once a week. Do all the things. And then by all means, and get rid of the cell phone. Get rid of the cell phone. We did not have that kind of an expense in the 90s and the 80s. There was a landline. We didn't pay $1,000 for the phone. We didn't pay a couple $100 a month to have a landline. Get rid of your cell phones. We didn't have laptops. We didn't even have computers. We still got up to change the dial on the TV. That was a big day, right? When we could record something on a VHS. All this new stuff is awesome. It's awesome. I love it. I don't want to go back. If we have to work off the farm, we have to work off the farm. But what is the value? Let me get back on track here. What is the value of that thing that you're buying? If somebody sees a value of $100,000 for a vehicle, great. If somebody sees the value to overpay for a property, great. Some of the property stuff in our area, 40-acre spots are very uncommon, very uncommon. You can find 1 acre, 2 acre, but you're not finding anything above 10 is very hard to find, anything above 5. And so when it comes available, people are paying over asking because it's demand. But with that demand comes the highest bidder. And so we get mad because people are paying more for things and they're driving up the market. So the question needs to become, how do we do that? How do we pay for that? Instead, we're all sitting here upset because of what's happening. We are causing this to happen. The government's not causing this. As much as I don't like them, they're maybe causing it because interest rates were low, so you thought you could pay more for something. I love that interest rates are higher because it slows down people from overpaying. Because people say, well, I can afford that payment, it's okay. And they buy based on payment. They're not buying based on the fact that, geez, I paid more principal. If you paid more principal, whatever price per acre you paid was more. If the interest rate's higher, guess what? People aren't going to go as high per price per acre. In the long run, you're going to be better off in that scenario. Because if I'm going to pay less price per acre, I can always refinance that land note. If we can pay less for a combine, then great, we have more equity when we go to sell it. So yes, there are benefits to buying used. But when we're looking at the value of something, it's just the value somebody else is going to place on it. There are certain things I will not buy. My family makes fun of me because I'll buy rental property, I'll buy land. Those are all things that I absolutely love to buy. We create equity in those things. But to buy something like, let's just say I need a new coat. Oh my gosh, I just won't buy a new coat because I'm like, I'm not spending $50 or $100 on that. No, absolutely not. Because it doesn't mean anything to me. I don't have a value for it. I can't justify why that makes sense. If I buy a new vehicle, I have spreadsheets of what the trade-in values are most likely going to be. Who's going to hold their highest value? Because that is a luxury item to me. That is not something that's going to be this most amazing thing 20, 30, 40 years down the road. But somebody else is going to buy that vehicle and not care because it's pretty. And so they're buying just based off of looks and emotion of how they're going to feel in that vehicle. So think about that. The value of whatever it is we're doing is based on the value of the person paying for that. And if somebody else sees more value, they're going to drive up the market for vehicles, for houses, for land, for equipment, for seed, for chemical, for fertilizer. It doesn't matter. If you need fertilizer, you will pay what they're asking. If everybody quit paying what they're asking, they would drop the price of fertilizer. But demand says, I need this, or I'm not going to get X, Y, and Z. So you're willing to pay that because you see the value of that. I think that we think that this is an invisible thing that's happening, and it's just making it so hard to live and everything is so expensive. And yes, because we as humans are the problem. We're paying for stuff and we're overpaying for stuff because we don't put a limit on the value of what that is. Whoever wins that auction was the person that saw the most value. Whoever pays the most for a vehicle, that was the value. Does that all make sense? I know this was a bit of a rant, but when I talk to young people, they want stuff so badly that they get frustrated because it's expensive. Especially like millennials and Gen Z, they are the ones that are needing homes, right? And they're so frustrated because they're overpaying, or they feel like they're overpaying, but it's because the people before them overpaid. And so if they would all just quit buying out of fear and emotion that they're never going to find another house, okay, then we quit raising the price of housing. When the Feds increased interest rates, they thought that's what was going to happen, is people are going to quit overspending. When in fact, that didn't even help. Because there's such a scarcity mindset that we're never going to have a house to live in, that we overpay. A lot of times we think, well, there's never going to be any more land to buy, so we're going to overpay for what there is. So we have to keep our emotions in check and go, do I really want to overpay for that? Hey, you guys, I'm not over here preaching to you. I'm over here thinking about myself as well. Because one thing that I learned about auctions, you better check your emotions. And it's funny because I saw something on the interwebs about how auctioneers are trained to work on emotion. Because the more emotional they can get people, the higher the bidding is, right? And so you got to keep that in check and say, okay, justify paying this amount of money because I'm going to hold it forever. That makes more sense than overpaying and then losing money short term. Land is a long-term investment. My rental properties, I don't know that I'm going to keep them long-term. One of them I'm ready to sell because I needed it for a purpose. It served its purpose. Yeah, I'd prefer to have that money into something else. And so when I bought that, I knew I wasn't going to probably hold it forever. And so I bought it knowing okay, if we break even on this thing, we're good. But I'm not overpaying. So I actually paid under asking price when everybody else was paying over asking price. I have no idea why the thing didn't sell. I got nothing for you. No idea. But I will come in and try to negotiate to where it makes sense for me. I'm not going to overpay for everything. I have to see the value in that. Okay, you guys, let me know if you have comments on this. No one's going to have questions. But let me know if you have comments, if you have things that I need to discuss in further podcasts. Email me on that. But otherwise, you have a fantastic rest of your day and go get your books as Christmas gifts. Have a good one.
Thanks for listening to the Farming Without the Bank podcast. We hope today's episode has inspired you to take control of your finances in new ways. Don't forget to check out our website, farmingwithoutthebank.com, and engage with us on our Facebook page, Farming Without the Bank. Join us next week as we smash more financial myths and empower you to accomplish your financial goals.